hype man when you got Liam in the chat. Look at this guy. Look at this guy. Hype man for life. How's my audio, dog? Is it good? I know the music's still loud. I'll phase it out in a minute here. That first song was so fire. I gotta go back to it. Hold on. This is a stream beat song. Let's check this out real quick. Hold on up. Dude. You're like, okay. This is getting good. I can see this being something. You ready? You ready for this sick beat drop? Sick. I'm gonna be honest, the first time I heard it, I remember the beat dropping coming on a lot sooner. Now it just looks silly. This is forever too, like this is recorded on the internet for ages to come. Everyone will see this and make fun of me for assuming the beat drop was sooner than expected. Oh, how will I ever live it down? There it is, ready? Yeah. I think I'm starting every stream with this one from now on. I now know I just need to cut out like the first minute. And now let's talk about capitalism. Just feels like too intense for the actual vibe. Imagine you work as like a coupon salesman, but this is like your hype music. You like walk out of the van, doves behind you, flames, pyrotechnics. Now let's sell coupons. Alright, that's enough of that. I've killed that bit. The bit is dead, Alex. Let's fade out the music here. We actually are going to talk about something serious today. Nothing makes me want to talk about capitalism more than hard beat drops. Amen to that. That's funny, dude. It feels good to be back. I have not done a stream in a long time, outside of me doing some Mythic Raid and basically just screwing around. So this one is more for the purpose of sharing my feelings and some thoughts about some things and getting some real, actual content of the show out there. So, yeah. My camera's a little goofy right now. I don't know what's going on with that, but it looks fine enough. My audio good in the chat? Liam, sound good? I'm sure he'll be back around. So I started this Change My Mind series, and I had a bunch of different episodes planned. Like the idea behind the Change My Mind episodes is to take, let's get the heat started early. Lo-fi is a product of capitalism. Yeah. I feel targeted. And it might be. I don't know. It might be authentic art, uninfected by the capitalism bug. We'll figure that out before the end of this conversation. I'm not sure. Lo-fi slaps. Capitalism or not, lo-fi slaps. Everybody can get down to some lo-fi Bernie filibuster. But I started this series about changing my mind about given topics, and it's kind of to poke fun at this guy who's way more popular than me on YouTube, named Steven Crowder, the Change My Mind Mug Club loser. Yeah, it turns out that guy sucks, and he's awful and evil, and has been abusing his wife and randomly flashing his junk to everybody he works with. So, it feels extra good to like make a series that like counters his whole idea, his shtick, right? So the idea is changed my mind. I'm not going to sit here and grandstand and tell you something I'm so confident and show up to a college campus with 19-year-olds and not give them a chance to actually argue with me and then be like, change my mind, and then act like I've dunked on people and brag about that, which is what he used to do. Instead, I'm doing something that I feel is a lot more enlightened, and I'm taking something that I used to believe and used to feel strongly and kind of going through why I changed my mind about it, why I changed my mind. And today's episode of that is capitalism. I was raised conservative, Christian, pro-life, all of the other feelings that you would think would come with that. It's always been really interesting to me that what comes with that is often like the most die-hard people who believe in like rugged free market capitalism, every man for himself. No welfare, no handouts, no government help, right? And the reason why that's interesting now, looking back on it, is like one of the first Bible stories I was told as a kid was like Jesus feeding the 5,000 people with the bread and the fishes. And at least in the copies and the manuscripts that we have, that wasn't a means tested program. He didn't go around and be like, I'm going to need you to fill out this form and let me know if you're poor enough to actually get this fish and the bread. He just gave him fish and bread. Like the Christian thing to me was always like a much more giving philosophy, but somehow in the concept of rugged American capitalism, we're like, nah, get your ass to work. You got to prove that you deserve bread and fish. I've always thought that was really odd. But in like terms of like how important this was to me, like I would get like pretty feisty in some of my defense and some of my arguments. I mean, it was something I felt the most strongly about. And I don't even know how that necessarily developed, but a lot of it came from the politics of my father. He was a watch Fox News every Sunday kind of guy. There were certain arguments that I used, which I'll get to shortly here. And there were certain like arguments that I would repeatedly roll out that seemed to defeat counter arguments pretty easily, like things that like people couldn't rebuttal, couldn't respond to. And also there's one key thing about it, which is just this like idea of a meritocracy, right? It's pretty straightforward. Work hard, live within your means, and you'll be fine. And that I think that sells for a lot of people. I think a lot of people think that that's still the system we live in. So arguments that I used to use. Number one, and probably the most important one, is that before capitalism, right, and especially modern capitalism, where we have the benefits of banking systems and currencies across the entire world, the average person had the worst living conditions ever in history. And that was true across cultures and everything. So if you look at, what we came out of in that feudalistic world before then, essentially all you ever have, if you look backwards pre-capitalism, was the average individual was living in some kind of miserable hell, subservient to a lord, a king, a ruler. Many people were slaves throughout history. People very rarely had to do it. I mean, that's the story that we're told, and we're convinced that that's true. And I mean, for certain areas of the world, that more or less is the truth of it, right? Like if you had a powerful enough local lord or king that could, take a portion by force of anything that you did manage to get for yourself, I mean, they would do it. And so a lot of people lived miserably. And this idea of free market capitalism allowing everybody to like keep the fruits of their labor and freely trade that however they want seems to be one of the best antidotes for it. And I mean, there's some parts of that that's true. I don't think anybody would argue that the current state of Western capitalism isn't better than feudal Europe in the 1500s. I mean, most of us have a much better standard of living, and there are certain measurements of that. So it's a pretty convincing argument. There were a lot of arguments that people would bring up about, look at these other countries and, that are socialist, and look at what they're doing with their societies, and look at how, much more benefit there is in some of those. And then I would just point to, the bigger socialist regimes and countries, like, what happened with the Soviet Union and what happened with Venezuela and some of these other ones. I would say, yeah, but those are just societies that haven't figured out that they can't actually cash these debts out. And then the Greece thing happened. And if you don't know what happened in Greece, Greece, just like a while ago, there was a big talking point where they kind of defaulted on their national debt. There was a banking collapse and everything went bad. And the easiest line to draw was just, look, this was because of their out of control entitlements. And they were giving away too much money to their average citizen. And this caused a lot of problems. So I believed all this, and I believe this really strongly. Part of it was I wasn't exposed to people who were making better arguments. I wasn't exposed to the actual anti-capitalist arguments that have been good throughout the years. So I think had I had that happen sooner, I probably would have changed my mind sooner. But look, it's just the easiest, most obvious thing. Capitalism created the richest country on earth, where the average person seems to be doing pretty well. And if you look at other countries, they're not doing as well as us. So there, man, capitalism. It's like king, right? It's got to be good. So, interesting. Let me take a peek. Oh yeah, I see that. Dropped frames 25% over the last 2 minutes. Let's see if we can fix that a little bit. I don't know if I'm going to be able to midstream here, but I can. I can make these match up a little bit and see if that helps. We'll try that. All right, so stream quality is good right now. So yeah, I had this issue where certain of these arguments just seem to be really disingenuous to me, and I didn't really like when people challenged me on it, because it was just like, I probably wouldn't entertain it because I thought it was super obvious. And I think that's really important. There's probably a lot of people who could watch this and they probably would have shut it off already, because they're like, yeah, man, there's no way you can argue. Like, the evidence for capitalism being good is just so obvious and everywhere. And I think that that's fair in a lot of ways. I think that if you understand history, all of history is soaked in blood and very messy. And when people have these kinds of opinions about, like, the history of capitalism and what it pulled us out of, I think it's, like, really, really fair to understand where people are coming from with that. Now, the flip side is, in my case, probably some of the biggest triggers that there's, like, a problem here were actually my own personal life events. And I think this is part of the problem, is it's really hard to talk people out of these positions if you don't actually experience some of these hardships directly, either through you or through somebody who's really close to you. And it's always really easy to rationalize everybody who's having a bad time as someone who made the wrong choices, or spent over their means, or didn't work hard enough, or all of those things. And there weren't a lot of arguments that I had heard that kind of change that. So, for example, the life events that happened to me is by the time I'm 25, I have 3 children, but I've been working 60 hours a week plus every single year of my life. My credit is already shot. My credit is already shot. I'm having some, just struggles trying to pay my bills and provide for my kids. And all of that is really tough, really exhausting and difficult. And I don't understand why I'm going so far backwards. Like, why is it that one person working this hard can't afford their own life? And at the time, we were even receiving some assistances like food stamps and Medicaid and didn't have to pay for some things out of pocket. And yet it was still a challenge to pay my bills every month. And that really just felt like that shouldn't happen. No one should work 70 hours a week or 60 hours a week and still be paycheck to paycheck. So I had that life event happen to me. And did I work 70 hours a week doing minimum wage work? No, I was a store manager. I was making good money. I had risen above what a lot of people would consider entry level, job and wages, and was making a minimum of $45,000 a year. Now, for a family of 5, is that a ton of money? No, but you can't exactly have 2 incomes, right? Because you're with 3 kids very close together. No way you can afford daycare. That's not going to happen, And so it starts bringing up some questions. I'm starting to just challenge, like, okay, maybe some of these programs are actually good, but there's just too many abusers in the system. There's too many freeloaders that are actually, for the people that work hard like me that actually deserve the handout, they're the ones bogging the system down, and that's what's making it so hard. And I kind of bought into that Fox News, like there's a bunch of freeloaders argument. There's probably many people out there that you've talked to that that also still buy into this argument. Liam, can you let me know, is it still kind of buffering and causing issues? Because I'm getting some notifications that I'm still dropping like 25% of my frames. Slightly sometimes. Is it like unwatchable? Is it like really bad? Okay. I might have to play with some settings before next time. Yeah, so that it's definitely like actually coming from my stream. Oh, it's up to like 32% drop frames. That's really weird because like I have everything working really well. Let me try one more thing here. Hang on. Let's just try dropping the FPS that I'm trying to put out there and see if that helps. Okay. So when you look at like the questions I had, it was kind of like, why why is it that some people can work really hard and have a really bad time and have, no permanent kind of like financial freedom, and why are there others who can do almost nothing and get perfectly lucky? That seemed inherently unfair. And then, why is it some people can get away with, I knew people who were really taking advantage of a lot of the government programs that were out there and not really putting anything back into the system in any way. Like, they're not working, they're not really contributing to society, and that really bothered me and upset me. And then there was the problem of just like, what what is the hey Claire, welcome to the party. What is the issue with everyone who's like, I never understood why everybody had a problem with billionaires, and I got really sick of the Bernie hate, or the Bernie kind of hater mentality towards billionaires, because to me it was like, those people are the ones who produce something in capitalism, give the rest of us jobs, and I used those arguments. So while I had some questions, right, and I felt like maybe there could be some tweaks to capitalism, it was just obvious to me that you need some people to get hyper successful, you need that motivation out there for people to want to be successful, and that it's got to work that way. So what started to change my mind? Again, these personal struggles started to get worse and worse and really affect me personally. But then, more importantly, I happened to start hearing a bunch about universal basic income. This idea that the government would give everybody $1,000 a month. Now, at the time, my politics is fairly libertarian. So it's like, less government. No, I want least government involvement possible. Let live and let live. Let people do whatever they want to do. And that to me was just like this big government solution that it's like pie in the sky. Our country's already in tons of national debt. There's no way you just give everybody $1,000 a month, right? Like, that's a ridiculous notion. You can't give everybody money. And I really believed that. And so what kind of changed my mind initially, that maybe I should be more open-minded to it, wasn't actually done with the right intentions. I wanted to argue against all of the people speaking in favor of universal basic income. So I listened to a podcast, and for the very first time heard Andrew Yang go on Sam Harris's podcast and talk about, for the fact that he was running for president. At the time, I made fun of him and called him an idiot, and said it was the dumbest idea I'd ever heard. He was talking about his universal basic income. But what struck me is he was incredibly intelligent. He brought up certain economic facts that I had not heard before, and certain other like positions that like really intrigued me. And I was like, this is, I don't know that I could argue against this. So what were some of those? The first kind of arguments was that whatever you think about entitlements and like government programs and giving out money, it's clear that they're not working, right? Can't we all agree on that? And it's like, okay, that seems pretty reasonable. Because the help isn't going to the people who need it, and there are people getting wealthier and wealthier, while the average person is struggling being able to pay their bills. And at the time, I think the stats were something like 45% of Americans can't afford an unexpected $500 expense. Well, now that figure is like more like almost 60%. So we're talking in just a matter of a few years, especially with COVID and everything else, that problem's gotten much, much worse. It's like, okay, I could see that. I could see that the assistance isn't actually working. He started making a lot of really interesting points about job automation. And the fact that, like, one argument that was really interesting to me was like, are the truckers who end up having their jobs eliminated by the automated trucks, well, which one day will be on the road, right? Like someday the automated trucks are coming. We're going to automate the shipping industry to a point where a ton of these people are going to lose their job. And the stats would tell you that those people would go get rehired or retrained and then rehired for a new job. That's what the economics textbooks say. Like, that's what should happen in a creative destruction kind of capitalism. And that would be the argument that I would have made to anybody who brought up automation. The problem being that if you look at the government stats on what happened to all the people who lost the manufacturing jobs due to the automation wave of the 90s and the 2000s, it's pretty bad. And I think it helps being in Des Moines because we have a very close by example. The entire community of Newton and surrounding area, like with what happened with the Maytag plant, Liam with the O face. I don't know what's that all about. But the entire town of Newton had Maytag close, and I mean literally the place went to shit. And if you look at the statistics, what Andrew Yang was talking about is most of these people ended up on disability forever, dropped out of the workforce completely, The ones who entered retraining programs only found a new career like 10% of the time, and only 25% of them even bothered to enter into one of the retraining programs that was offered by the government. So that wasn't effective at all. Many of them ended up turning to really bad things like addictions, opioid use spike, and in some cases suicide. Many of them ended up on disability forever. So here's a real life example of what should happen, and it just flat out didn't happen. These people are just living in abject poverty now. Can you really look yourself in the mirror and say all those truckers must have been, or all those manufacturing workers must have been lazy? Um, I wonder if I should. I'm gonna drop the stream and see if I can tweak something, and I'm gonna restart live. So we'll do part one. This was part one, the introduction, and now we'll have part